Welcome back to the Ben Motorcycle Adventures podcast, your hub for everything off-road, dual sport, and adventure motorcycle. My name is John. I will be your host. Episode number 12, Ben Motorcycle Adventures podcast, and it is another good one. Thanks for joining us. Thank you for listening. Tonight on the show, Jenna, that's jensmotoadventures.com, at Jen's Moto Adventures on Instagram. Outstanding interview. She's got a couple bikes, Triumph Tiger 800, WR 250, and I did a little bit of research on her through her website, and she's ridden a lot. 27,000 miles on one bike, 30 on another. She's an East Coaster, so she, routinely comes to the West Coast and does adventure type rides. So very interesting interview, and she just started riding in 2013. So I would tell you that, tell those of you who think it might be too late to get out and adventure on a motorcycle that it is truly never too late because, like I said, she started in 2013. We just broke into 2019, and she has already logged a ton of miles. So great guest, great interview, and thank you, Jenna, for coming on. Really appreciate it. Man, I thought we had some crazy motorcycle adventures here in the States and in North America, but I've been watching this documentary. I think it's called The Ride, London to Beijing, and it's hosted by this guy who holds a few Guinness World Records, I believe, for fastest travel around the globe on a motorcycle or something. But anyway, he essentially gets this group of novice motorcycle adventurers and takes them from London to Beijing. I think they're all riding BMWs, and it's gnarly when you throw in traveling through foreign countries, and I don't know if I could do it, especially this particular ride. I don't even know if I could make it on the food that they were eating, but it's an epic ride for sure. The sights and sounds and everything are amazing, and I think all but one of them made it, at least on the documentary. But again, that the motorcycle adventure, and I think the spirit of motorcycle adventuring is limitless. You don't have to have a special route or a planned route. In fact, we talked to Jen about this tonight. A lot of times she just wings it, and sometimes that's the best way to put together a route. But what I really want to say is, you can ride from here to there, right? These guys decided they were going to, run a route from London to Beijing. You could run one from, San Jose, California to New Orleans, Louisiana, for no other reason than that's just a route that you wanted to ride. So kind of a limitless thing, but really humbled by watching, their adventures. Because here in the States, again, we're spoiled. I can ride hotel to hotel. I can usually go somewhere and get something good to eat that isn't really foreign to me, that my body will take. So a little bit enlightening when you get into China and some of these Asian countries. It's a whole nother world. Just watching them ride along on the streets, for instance, the crowded streets, sketchy, probably sketchier than anything I've done on a motorcycle, just due to the fact that there's so many people moving around. But anyway, I'm going to stop talking. Jenna's a great interview, and we're really lucky to have her on the podcast, so let's get to it. All right, guys, tonight on the show we have special guest Jenna. That's jensmotoadventures.com and at jensmotoadventures on Instagram. Jenna, first and foremost, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So I think I came across your Instagram profile maybe month and a half ago. You were riding your Tiger across pretty sizable water crossing. I was impressed, and you've got another bike, a WR 250. So I guess my first question is, why those two bikes? Why the Tiger and why the WR?
I started out on street bikes, and I started kind of following more people that were riding the ADV bikes on Instagram. And Steve Camrad's one that I followed. And he just always looked like he was having so much fun on his Tiger. So I really started looking hard at those. Of course, I looked at the BMWs as well. And after I went and test drove the Tiger, I just fell in love with it. It suits me really well. It fits me well. And I love that triple engine. So it's been a really great bike for me.
The Tiger, I did an adventure motorcycle training with some people here this summer, and the Tiger has a very unique sound, almost electric. It's really neat.
It does. It really does have its own sound.
So anytime I'm out there and I can hear that. I'm like, oh, that's a Triumph coming for sure. You can't mistake it for any other motorcycle.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you always know when it's a Tiger or really any Triumph. They're just really noticeable.
And then the WR250, I don't know if you listened to episode 7 of our podcast, but our friend Keith, he's got 3 of them.
I
And
I think he sold me on getting a Recluse.
yeah, he should be
selling that pretty hard.
He should most definitely be a salesman for Recluse, which they're a great option. But yeah, he's got 3 of them. He raved about them. What do you love about your WR250?
I've and it's funny for me because I haven't had as much time on it yet. I've spent way more time on the Tiger this year. I really should have took the WR out more than I did. I love how light it is, and it's just like so easy to maneuver and stuff. Whereas the Tiger is kind of a pig. So I'm still getting used to that because I've been so used to the bigger bike riding it through things. Having the smaller bike's actually kind of a transition for me. So I took it out once to an off-road park, and is a really sandy off-road park. So I had a whole lot of fun on it out there, and I'm looking forward to getting some more time on that and getting more used to it.
Yeah, I mean, the Tiger's definitely a purpose-built, long-haul type machine, so it's going to outweigh that WR, but they both have their place. Do you have any plans to maybe take the WR out on a longer adventure?
I do. Actually, I was planning on taking it to Colorado this year, and then my Colorado plans kind of got changed. I ended up going to Idaho instead, so I just took the Tiger. I didn't take the WR. So I'm hoping that maybe this summer I can take it out and do some trails out in Colorado and really get a feel for that bike.
Yeah, I think that would be the perfect mix for some dual sport riding. And again, like he said, a good mix of single track in there too. Pretty versatile machine for that. I kind of sifted through your website a little bit, and you, correct me if I'm wrong, you've got 30,000 miles on your Triumph already?
I do, yes. It's a 2016, and I've rolled 30,000 miles on it already.
That's crazy. And you started riding in 2013, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah. I started on a little Kawasaki Ninja 300. I rode that for about 5 months and then just decided I wanted something that I could, take across country. So I traded it for a Yamaha FC6R, and I rode that. I think I had like 27,000 miles on that when I traded it.
Wow, you don't mess around.
No, yeah, I don't sit still very much.
Okay.
Because I rode it out to Colorado and through Wyoming, and I think we did Utah that trip. And it was not as easy to ride across country as the Tiger because it didn't have cruise control and all that, the fancy stuff. But it was a fun little bike.
Interesting. So for all of those you think, you're too old or it's too late to start riding. I mean, Jenna, perfect example. She hasn't been riding for that long, and she's out, 30,000 miles here, 27,000 miles there. No big deal. Yeah. Anybody can pick this up at any time and go out and enjoy an adventure. So good point there. And yeah, back to a couple of the adventures you've been on. Could you kind of walk us through, you did one trip to the Midwest where you covered 6,300 miles. That's a lot of seat time. Could you kind of walk us through what that was like?
Yeah. And I've learned something after doing this for a few years. Cause I've actually been on, I think I've done 4 big cross country trips now. And, one of the things that I was really bad about the first few years was I wanted to pack as much stuff into my trips as I could. So for me, my trips were every night staying in a different place. Like we never stayed in the same hotel twice on a trip. So every day was at least 300 miles. So I was, taking off across the plains, which is terrible. I don't know if you've ever ridden through Kansas, but there's nothing there.
doesn't sound appealing to me. No,
it's really not. I've done it a handful of times now. But once you get, past Kansas and you get into Colorado and you see the mountains, it's just incredible and amazing. And you're so excited. So I would get out there and I would stay somewhere, and then I would have a route planned that would usually at the first few years, I wanted to see like all the national parks and the national monuments, or, any of the big touristy stuff that was there, because that's what you think you want to see.
Mm-hmm.
So, so I would plan my routes to kind of take me past all of that. And, I would find roads that people had said, hey, you have to hit this road. It's amazing. It's really curvy, or the scenery is really beautiful. So I would work some of that stuff in. But it was a lot of just really long days, like leaving very early in the morning, riding all day, seeing beautiful things. And then, you get to where you're going, have dinner, have a shower, sleep, and do it again the next day.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. It really is amazing going and staying somewhere else different every day. It's also like you have to stay on pace. So if you hit bad weather, you just kind of have to go with it. You have to ride through that. You don't really have the option of, hey, I'll just stick around another day because I've got my next accommodations booked for the next day.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? There's always some urgency associated with getting to that next point each and every day.
Yeah, there really is, especially when you book it that way. So now now that I'm a little more seasoned with it, I'm trying to kind of dial it back and maybe stay one place and go. And especially now that I'm doing more off-roading, I want to ride trails and stuff. So I'm kind of finding now that, like, for me, it's better to just kind of have a home base and then go from there and kind of come back each day and maybe have a couple of home bases, maybe do one area for a couple of days and then move on to the next area and explore that. And you see more of it.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point. Kind of the same thing when I started backpacking years ago. We started out, we had a bunch of heavy gear. We didn't really know what we were doing. And over time, we kind of shifted to the same mindset. Obviously, we got better, lighter gear. We got tired of unpacking everything. But we started hiking into one spot and then doing day hikes from points like that. And it made for a better adventure because it's kind of nice to come back at the end of the day and not have to set everything up again or tear it down in the morning too.
Yeah. And isn't it funny how when you first start, like, you way overpack and then you're like, you know what? I didn't use half that stuff.
No, it's totally true. And, that's why we did some of the podcasts on things to pack and stuff like that. It's based on experience. It's based on lugging a bunch of stuff around that never really needed. You know what I mean?
Yes. Like, if you could see what my FZ6R looked like the first trip I took out west, I had semi-rigid saddlebags. I had a tank bag. I had a top case. I had another tail pack that I had on there, and I had all that full. And now looking back on that, I'm like, you didn't use half that. And that poor bike was so loaded down,
Yeah.
but in my mind, I was like, I have to have everything.
No, I remember even, I'm fairly minimalist now, but even when I rode through Idaho, I had a pretty good size Wolfman duffel across the back seat. And after I got back, I was like, I probably could have found a home for most of the stuff and got by without that and even ditched some of the other things. So it's interesting after you take 2 or 3 trips, how you kind of refine, what's really important to bring along with you.
Right.
So
that's the good thing about having the home base too, is when you do go out and you ride the trails, you can kind of leave some of the stuff that you rode out with and not have, like, I've got the aluminum panniers and stuff. So leaving those at the room and not having those on while I'm riding the trails is so much nicer.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. A lighter weight bike usually has a tendency to handle a little bit better, and
Right.
panniers and things like that. I'd be worried about banging them up and stuff like that. So I totally hear you there. I was going to ask, living on the East Coast like you do, what's it like transitioning over to the West Coast for the first time, like on an adventure, the first time you've seen the West Coast?
It was incredible. Because I'd been out west snowboarding in the winter before, just flew out, but I've never been out there in a car even, other than that. So riding a motorcycle out there and getting that whole experience of doing it on a bike, because it's different than it is in a car. It's not.
Oh yeah.
I've learned that from doing it on the bike, that I would never want to do it in a car. Just being out in the elements, you see more of it, and you can smell everything, and it's phenomenal. And then when you see the mountains coming into view, because we just don't have mountains like that out here. We have mountains on the East Coast, but not like you guys have out there.
Yeah, well, not like the Rockies, for instance. I mean, nobody's got that, but
right, exactly. So having that come into view is just the most incredible feeling. And if for us we've already been riding for a few days before we get to that point. So, you know, after spending those long days riding across the plains and seeing nothingness, it's just fantastic to see those beautiful mountains, you know, snow-capped if you're there in early June and stuff. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's kind of rewarding. Eventually, you know, you're riding along, you start to see something off in the distance. You know, you're going to ride to the top of that or whatever. It's just kind of one of those things that, you know, you talk about long days on the motorcycle. It's one of those things that can kind of rejuvenate and pull you along too.
It is. It really is.
So on your second trip that you have listed here on your blog, you talk about 7,200 mile ride. Looks like it's more West Coast oriented. Couldn't help but notice you came to our home state, Oregon, saw some pictures of Multnomah Falls and whatnot. But what can you tell us about that particular ride?
That was my first big trip on the Tiger after I bought it. And that ride was incredible. We took a southern route, went down through Texas and New Mexico and Arizona. And we stopped, we saw the Grand Canyon, which was incredible.
Oh, yeah.
And then from there, we went on over into kind of Southern California, and we went to Yosemite, and that just blew me away. Like, it's one of those things, every time you go on a trip and you see, you know, the first big thing, you're like, this is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. So for me at that point, I think Yosemite was like the most incredible place that I'd been. So we went there and we went up through Lake Tahoe, and then we made our way over to the coast, and we did the Redwoods and the Avenue of the Giants.
Yep.
And from there we rode up the coast into Oregon, and we kind of went over and did Crater Lake, which then at that point, Crater Lake was the most incredible thing I'd ever seen.
Yep.
And it's still, you know, Crater Lake is still, I would say, top 3 for me. That's just beautiful. I took a picture, and when we got back, I had it printed out on canvas, and it's hanging in our living room. So that's just one of my favorite places I've been. And then from Crater Lake, we went back to the coast, and we rode all the way up the coast of Oregon, all the way to the top of Washington. And we did the Olympic National Park up there.
Oh, that's beautiful up there.
We tried to ride to the top of Hurricane Ridge, and we made it like a mile from the top. There's a picture on my Instagram. The fog was so thick that we couldn't see like at all. You couldn't see anything. So we didn't even make it all the way to the top because it just got to the point where it was unsafe and we had to turn around.
Yeah, that good old Northwest fog, Pacific Northwest fog.
But it was gorgeous though. You know, it was beautiful.
So yeah, the coastline would have been Highway 101. That's
yes.
Pretty amazing.
It was one of the best rides I've taken. Just, I mean, it's so beautiful. And, you know, living on the East Coast, I know we take things for granted and stuff. I don't think the East Coast is that beautiful, really. The West Coast, though, is incredible. Just, you know, there's like kind of a misty fog and all the greenery and on the cliffs and stuff. It's just beautiful. I would not mind seeing that all the time.
All right. So you've got Crater Lake in your top 3. I'd be interested to know what number 1 and 2 are.
All right. So last year I went to, okay, I'm blanking on the name of the national park. Glacier. Yeah. I totally had a blonde moment there. Forgot. Went to Glacier National Park and did the Going to the Sun Road. That was pretty much tops for me until we went on up into Canada and we did now I'm forgetting the name of the parkway up. Yeah, we went to Banff, and then the parkway that goes from Banff to Jasper is the Icefields Parkway. Yeah.
Okay.
That's incredible.
So 1 and 2 right there, you can tie them together. It's funny, I just happened across a blog post the other day. Somebody was complaining about the Road to the Sun and the number of people when you're riding it. Did you have an issue with a lot of vacationers and visitors when you rode through there?
You know, I did not. What I would suggest is that you get up early and you get there like as soon as the sun's coming up. And you ride through as soon as the sun's coming up. It's beautiful watching the sun come up over the mountains, but there's like nobody there. So I rode all the way through with just very minimal traffic. We would stop, take pictures. There was no one around. And then by the time we got to the other side and we were coming back, then it was just crazy busy. Like there were so many people, but we got to experience it getting there so early. We got to experience it without hardly anyone being there. And I do think it was during a weekday, so that probably helped.
Okay. Yeah, but you've got to beat all those vacationers out of bed, it sounds like.
Yes, like it is worth getting up early. And actually, I'm sure that the sunsets are also just beautiful there. But for me, just knowing that I could get there early and beat all those people out there, it was well worth it.
Yeah, and I've heard the same thing about Yosemite. I'm confident there's plenty of people that visit that park every year, but I think the same thing applies. Beat them, get up early.
Get up early. It is so worth it. And you can stay all day and, enjoy it throughout, but getting there early and just going ahead and riding through and seeing all of it without all the tourists. That way you don't have to, wait for them to get out of your picture before you take pictures and because coming back, there was a couple of times I wanted to stop and take pictures and it was so busy at that point. I was like, I can't get a picture without a tourist in it.
Yeah. Don't you love that? I also saw one picture on I don't know if it was on your feed or your website, but you lucked out on one of your adventures. You saw some moose, which was like my goal when I was in Idaho. I've seen moose in the Tetons before, but I'm like, when I go through Idaho, I got to see a moose. I got to get a moose, on camera, on video. Didn't capture it, but you did. So hats off.
Oh my!
I'm envious.
That story is actually pretty funny. That was in Colorado,
okay.
And because I had always wanted to see a moose, and we'd been out there a couple times, and I'd never seen one. And people post pictures and stuff, and I'm like, how do they get so lucky to see them? I never see them. So we were going through the Rocky Mountain National Park, and we chose a really bad day to do it. There was a bicycle, I don't know what you would even call it, not a rally, but a ride that they were doing through the park. So the road is very steep going up to go over the mountain to go on, down on the other side. And the bicyclists were going up, and there's all these people in these RVs, and they won't pass the bicycles. So I'm, on my loaded down Tiger, and I'm trying to go up this big hill, and they just keep, starting and stopping. And so I'm afraid I'm going to burn my clutch out because it's just, you're just inching forward. And so I'm like, if we can just make it to the top, it'll be fine. We'll make it. We'll be fine. So we get up to where we thought that they were stopping because there was a bunch of them parked, but they were just taking a break and there was more on around. But we went on around the other side of the mountain there, and the wind was just like so strong I couldn't hardly hold the bike up. So there they are, they're still inching forward, and then this wind is so strong that I can't even hardly stand. And so we just made the decision, we're like, we're not going to be able to make it. We're going to have to turn around and go back. So we turned around, and turning around wasn't very easy because it's kind of narrow there anyways, and you've got to drop off on one side. So we turned around and we went back, and I was just so mad because that was actually the second time that we tried to make that ride. First time weather stopped us a few years before. So I was so angry that I wasn't going to make it. And so we're riding back down, and then all of a sudden in my helmet, I hear my fiance, and he's like, oh my gosh, there's a moose. And I look, and there's a moose and her baby. And so we stopped and we got pictures, and it was incredible because there I'd always wanted to see a moose, and I was angry, and then there's a moose and a baby. So it was totally made it worth it that we'd ridden up there and didn't make it and had to come back.
So yeah, it came full circle. That's awesome.
Yeah, I did.
And funny thing for me, I spent a lot of time checking out people's photos on Instagram like most of us, but a week later, after I'd ridden through one particular spot in Idaho, someone had a video of a moose messing around in a lake in a spot where I literally stood a week before, and I'm like, man, why can't I catch a break up here? But
I know, right? Timing, it sucks.
Yeah, but I think that's maybe I don't want to call it a small part of the reason, but that's part of the reason that we like to get out there and adventure. You have opportunity to see things that you probably otherwise wouldn't, right?
Right, exactly. And doing it on a motorcycle, and especially an adventure motorcycle or a dual sport, you're going to see more than other people see, because you're going to go down roads and trails and stuff that they're not going to go down. So I think you see even more of it than what you would if you were in a car.
Yeah. Now back to, you mentioned that your fiance had talked to you through the helmet. What kind of communication device are you guys using with your helmets?
I think at the time we had the Cardo Scalar Rider G9s. Since then, we have switched, and we are now using the Senna, the 30K, the new ones that they came out with. I've been really happy with those so far. The only issue that I've had is trying to pair multiple people can be, I'm sure there's a finesse to it. And if I just sat down and like read through the booklet and really figured it out, it would be easier. But I know at a couple of events this year with my Revit Adventure team teammates, we tried to connect to each other, and it was kind of a headache.
Yeah, I get you. Usually when I take something out of the package, I just use it. I'm not big on the instructions, but we talked to, I believe it's Blake Scott on our last podcast, and he was commenting about how he liked those headsets and how he thought they brought, kind of an element of safety to the ride. You guys can stay connected, yep. Or like in your instance, your fiance saw a moose, notified you, and you guys were able to get in there and get some cool photos. So that's neat.
I think they really add another element to it. I know some people think, I'm riding a motorcycle, I don't want to talk to someone, but it's not like you're talking all the time. It's just nice to be able to say, hey, look at that. That way they don't miss something. Or if there's something in the road, you can say, hey, there's something in the road up here. Or if there's a distracted driver, you can kind of notify each other.
Oh, yeah,
so it really does. It adds some safety, and yeah.
Yeah, and I think, looking forward for us as we do adventures and tours, having that ability to communicate with people behind me and say, hey, you need to watch out for this, or hey, I'm stopped in the middle of the road for some reason. I can recall that happening here in 2018, for instance, just kind of dangerous spots in the road or the trail or whatever. I think it'd be a great means for, making the ride a little bit safer. But I can foresee some jawing back and forth, a little bit of trash talking here and there too.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Especially if you're doing something like that with you're out with your buddies and you're riding and stuff, and, kind of a, hey, watch what I'm doing, and, or something like that, I think it just adds to the fun for me.
Okay. So you've been on some pretty long adventures. Most people don't go on rides this long. Is there anything special that you do, in order to plan for something like this?
I'll just go online and kind of, I'll know what area I'm going to go to, and then I'll go online and try to read what other people have said when they went on trips out there, like other motorcyclists. That way I kind of get a feel for, the roads that I definitely want to hit, or the things I definitely want to see. But other than just kind of narrowing down the area I want to go to, part of the time we just kind of wing it.
Right on.
And we'll ask, one thing that I learned this year, ask locals for the good routes, because when I was in Idaho, I asked the locals for a good route for one of the days that we didn't have anything planned. And the route that they sent me on ended up being one of my favorite parts of that ride. Because they sent me on it was one of the ones I was telling you about the other day.
Near the Lolo. Okay.
Yeah, it was that, the one that went up to the Beaver Ridge Lookout.
Okay.
So that was one that some of the Idaho locals told me about, and that was an incredible ride. So I definitely recommend asking locals, for their suggestions for routes and stuff, because they know where all the good stuff's at.
Yeah, for sure. When I was in, I believe it was Pine, Idaho, I was staying at this bed and breakfast, and there was a couple other couples, and they were natives of Idaho, and they recommended a couple spots that I go along the way too. It's funny, they were very interested. They needed to see my map. They needed to point at places that I should go and things like that. I'm like, well, I'm kind of following this route, but yeah, thank you. Thank you for the advice. So you're right. I mean, who's going to know better, right?
Right. Exactly. So, but then, too, following your own route that you had planned too is exciting too, because you already, you had a reason that you planned that route. So.
Yeah, I get invested in my routes, and like you talk about searching online, ADV Rider is a great resource. but it's kind of
Yes.
a double-edged sword because I start to look at these cool trips and I want to go. Maybe I can't go right now, or it's one of those things where you're like, "Ah, I need to plan this, but it's killing me. I need to get out there too."
Yeah, it does the same thing to me. And Instagram is the same way.
Oh yeah,
Follow
it's the
people
worst.
and then seeing the pictures that they post, like all of you in the Pacific Northwest, not pointing fingers, but but it like all the content coming from out there is just incredible, and it kills me because I'm like, I want to go. I want to go so bad.
I know, and I've been thinking about Instagram the last few days, and I'm like, in my head, I'm like, is this real? I'm not sure. I just some of the stuff I see is just amazing, and it's weird that we
I
get
know.
to get out and experience some of this stuff, and for some people, it's where they call home. It's regular for them. It's just like wow.
And it's funny because when I go to post my content from Indiana, and I'm like, here's my creek crossing because this is the only thing that looks like having a whole lot of fun. I'm like, we just don't have quite the beautiful scenery that you guys have.
Yeah, but I suppose when you do get out here, it makes it that much more rewarding too. I think there's something to be said for that.
Oh, it certainly does.
I think we live in a really cool area here, and I've traveled around for years. And I think sometimes, like even when I was in Idaho, I probably took some things for granted just because I go, man, I'm seeing stuff like this sometimes on a daily basis, but probably shouldn't take that stuff for granted.
Yeah, it's easy to do when you see it daily, though. But it is. It's incredible what you guys have out there. It's just beautiful.
So recently, I just happened to be thumbing through some stuff on Amazon Prime, and I came across this kind of movie, whatever you want to call it, and it was this guy who took people on a motorcycle adventure from London to Beijing, China, and it was pretty gnarly. Some of the things they had to do to get there, but that got me thinking. As I interview some guests, what would be like a dream ride or a dream destination for you moving forward?
I think that list is just like getting really long at this point. I have big on my list is I would love to go and do Norway and Sweden. I think that would be incredible.
The Fords.
Yeah, and do Iceland.
That
And
Iceland Instagram account, Ride Locals or who?
yes.
Oh my
Yes.
gosh, yeah.
I can't get enough of that. I think I found them after the article on Upshift Online, and
Yep.
I'm just like, I'm blown away by the pictures that they post, and I'm like, oh, I want to go there so bad.
No, I told my girlfriend, I said, if the opportunity presents itself in 2019, I'm going to go. I definitely need to go
you
do
should.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely should.
Problem is, I might not come back.
Right?
So,
Yeah. It looks, it almost doesn't even look real. Some of the pictures, I'm just like that. It almost looks fake. It's so incredible.
yeah. So for me, we don't have anything like that here, and everything looks, stunning and dramatic. And that, you're right. I think right now for me, there's things I want to do like the Continental Divide, and there's plenty of things to see here on the West Coast and whatnot. But I think right now for me, that's probably number one.
Right. Yeah. I that's really high on my list too. And I know that that's one that I'm going to have to plan for and kind of save up for, but I really hope that I can make that happen in the future.
Yep. I'm totally with you.
I think realistic, one that I would like to do in the next few years that would be a little more realistic for me is probably riding to Alaska and back. And I know that's like
Oh, wow.
the thing that all adventure riders say is on their bucket list, and stuff. But it's on mine too. So.
No, I've thought about that too, and I've looked into. There's a couple motorcycle adventure companies up there. I think the timing is probably critical considering the seasons up there. But yeah, that's probably a close second for me. But shoot, I'd have to get some people to go with me. I don't know if I want to do that one by myself.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't want to do it by myself. I definitely want to get a small group. I don't want to do a huge group, but a small group would be fantastic.
Yeah, I actually used to race with a guy, and he's since passed away. But they rode from Oregon, and I want to say, they rode to the northernmost point in Alaska a few years ago, and it looked amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen some pictures from other people that have done it, and I'm just like, that's a ride that I want to do. I think that would be incredible. And I've always wanted to go to Alaska anyways, and I've never been. So do it on a motorcycle.
Yeah, no, perfect. I think that's the best way to go. From what I've heard, the roads suck anyway, so I don't think I don't think I want to drive up there. But kind of piggybacking that topic, you've got a couple awesome bikes. Is there something else out there that you don't have that you think you'd like down the road? Kind of a dream bike?
I really got my eyes on that new Triumph 1200 Scrambler they're coming out with. Because I have vintage bikes too and stuff, so I love that vintage styling. So I love the classic look of it, but then the Scrambler, and from what I'm hearing from my friends and stuff, is that it's pretty capable off road. So I think that would be a really fun bike to add to my garage at some point.
Okay.
But other than that, that Tiger really suits me. I really love it. So I would maybe down the road trade it for an XCA. When I bought the XRT, the roadie model, I didn't realize that I was really going to get into off-roading. But it does fine. It gets the job done, and it's really comfortable on the road. So it's fine for now.
Yeah. So what's your favorite thing about that bike anyway?
I love how comfortable it is. For me, it's so funny because I can't even really explain it. I'm just so used to riding it and stuff that it's just comes natural to me. So even taking it on some gnarlier stuff out in Idaho and stuff, I never feel uncomfortable on it. I always feel pretty in control of it. I love that it has heated grips and a heated seat though for the winter. So
that's
if I'm
cheating.
That's pretty nice.
That's a luxury item. I noticed that you'd also ridden a 1090 KTM 1090. How would you compare the two, or is there a comparison?
I don't think there's really a comparison. And I didn't get to ride the 1090 off road, which is where that bike is meant to be ridden, really. Because you can kind of tell just from riding it, it wants to be off road and stuff. I really love the exhaust on it because the Tiger is kind of quiet, and it's got like we were talking about, it's got its own distinct sound. That 1090's got a little more of a growl to it. So that was kind of fun to ride a bike that just sounded a little mean going down the road. It's a little taller than the Tiger for me, even though I have my Tiger in the tall position. I had to kind of, slide a cheek over on the 1090 to get a foot down. So that's something that I would just have to get used to. I know that Solid Performance I think they're out of Pennsylvania. They have a 2-inch lowering kit for them.
Okay.
But I don't think I would want to go that route. I would just want to leave it stock height and get used to sliding to get a foot down, that way you don't lose the suspension travel for riding it off road and stuff.
Yeah. I'd probably steer around from that too. And I rode a 1090 and I'm 6 foot tall, and I was like, wow, I don't know how good this will be for shorter riders, but I mean, yeah, seats are always an option, but, I'm very fond of the 1090s, but it's going to be a toss up when it's time for me. Triumph, KTM, BMW, and you talk about rides to Alaska. That I'd want to upgrade to a bike like that. I think when we're talking about those kind of rides, I think that'd be amazing.
Yeah, it would. And they're all good bikes, so I think it comes to personal preference. I rode a BMW before I test drove the Triumph, and I didn't love it. But I know, I have some of my teammates have BMWs and love them. So I think it's just personal preference for what works for one person may not work for another. Yeah.
And I think you're right. I mean, try to ride them all if you can. I look at the BMWs. So if I'm going by looks, it's tough to beat a BMW, but you're right. You may jump on it. It may not be for you either. So.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you find the one though, it just feels right and you're just ready to go and you want to take it out and rip on it. And
definitely.
Yeah. It's like,
it's like, you're establishing a relationship. You're like, we're going to be together here for a while. So this is going to have to work out. But,
exactly.
Okay. Back on Motorcycle Adventures, a question that keeps popping up for me when I talk to a lot of you guests. I think you get out there and you kind of get a chance to disconnect from the everyday stuff. You're not always staring at your cell phone. You're not taking calls. You're not at work. So a chance to disconnect and what I would say reconnect. But, What have you learned while you're out there on the road adventuring?
Um, for me, I've learned how much I love to travel. Because I did traveling before I had a motorcycle, obviously a little bit, but not to the extent that I've done it on a bike.
Mm-hmm.
I found out that I just really, I actually don't even love being home very much anymore because I love to travel so much. So, for me, I just feel so just kind of free, and I don't have anything weighing me down when I'm out on the bike. And just seeing how many beautiful things there are, even just in our own country, and then in Canada and stuff. But I can't wait for the day that I get to go overseas and rent a bike and see all of that as well. But just taking in nature, taking in the beauty of all of it, that's the big thing for me. I just really, really love that aspect of it.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat, and I always reflect on one of my days in Idaho this past summer. I was standing on a bridge. The river there was beautiful, but it wasn't a particularly stunning area. But it's like you felt kind of, it was kind of liberating. You felt connected. Nobody around, really quiet. I don't know. It's something about being out there on a motorcycle. It's very fulfilling.
It is. It really is. And then, like you said, like nobody being around. When I was out in Idaho this summer and we were riding, I didn't see anyone. When I was out on the trails or the back roads, obviously when you get out on 12 and stuff, you do. But we would go for miles and miles and miles and not see anyone, and just have the nature, see the animals, and that's just incredible. Because in everyday life it's so busy and there's so many people, and so when you get out there and there's no one around, it's just wonderful.
Yeah, that was I don't want to say it was alarming, but there was a day this past summer where I think I was out. I think it was about 6 hours and I didn't see anybody. And we talk about riding through national parks, and I guess one of my issues is the amount of people usually in there. But you can go out kind of in the middle of nowhere and see things that rival what's in these parks, and you don't have to fight with the crowds either when you're on the motorcycle. So
exactly, yeah, and that's one of the things that I've learned over the years, because from those first few years being on the sport tour and stuff and doing all that, and being aggravated at how many people were in Yellowstone when I was there, to now just going out and riding the trails and being out away from everyone. It's so much better.
all right, for me, I've kind of run through my list of questions. Is there anything you want to add for any of us?
No, I would just say that if anyone wants to follow along with me, they can find me on Instagram at Jen's Moto Adventures. Follow the blog, jensmotoadventures.com. And I think that's about it.
Okay, well, if we keep following along, perhaps we'll see you riding through Iceland next year or something like that.
Oh, I hope so.
All right, Jen, really appreciate you coming on and donating your time.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
Okay, have a good evening.
All right, you too.
Thank you. All right, guys, jensmotoadventures.com, at Jen's Moto Adventures on Instagram. Check her out. Follow along with that blog and with that feed on social media. And like I said, we might luck out and see what it's like to ride in Iceland. I'm hoping that she doesn't beat me to Iceland. Hoping to get there in 2019 myself. Looks amazing, and I actually reached out to these guys. We're going to do a podcast with them so you can learn a little bit more about what they offer. But they've got like 4, 6, and 7 day motorcycle adventures through Iceland. Looks pretty killer. I've got the passport. I'm locked and loaded. I'm ready to go. It's just a matter of time before we fly off to Iceland and do that ride. Looks amazing. But one more time, thank you, Jenna. Really appreciate you coming on, and excellent conversation. www.benmotorcycleadventures.com. That is our website. You can check out any off-road, dual sport, or motorcycle adventure rides that we have coming up in the near future. I've got a blog. You can go back in time. You can listen to all of our podcasts there. You can check out my latest blog posts. I've got one on the Golden Tire GT723 Adventure Rally Raid tires up. I've also got one on there for your motorcycle adventure toolkit and the 15 things that I include in my motorcycle adventure toolkit. So lots of content there. And again, if you want to come on an off-road, dual sport, or adventure motorcycle ride, this is your spot. iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Don't care where you're listening. Just appreciate all the listens. I know I say this every week, but the reviews, the subscriptions, and the downloads just went through the roof after Christmas Eve and Christmas. So thank you. It lets me know that we're providing valuable content, and it lets me know that we're bringing on awesome guests like Jenna. So thank you for listening. And again, still looking forward to bringing on more guests and providing more valuable content moving forward. As far as the next episode, I'm not sure who the guest is going to be. I've got a number of podcasts recorded. I've got a lot of guests lined up to record with. So your best bet, if you want to know who's coming up next, is to follow us on Instagram at Ben Motorcycle Adventures. And usually on a daily basis, I've got 5 to 10 Instagram stories posted and at least one photo posted in the main feed. So try to drop some different content there than we're dropping on Facebook and elsewhere. So again, if you want updates about who's coming on our podcast next, make sure you follow us on Instagram at Ben Motorcycle Adventures. And I think with that is enough for me. Great podcast. One more time. Thank you, Jenna. And you know what? We'll see you guys next time. Thank you for listening.